Thank you, David.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I want to thank Gretchen and other speakers for illustrating the fact that it's not just the victim who's hurt by these imposed arbitration provisions. The provisions are used to create secrecy. That secrecy means that other victims don't come forward, and it means the victimization continues. Now, last December, Senator Sherrod Brown, ranking on banking, and I introduced the Justice for Victims of Fraud Act. This is a narrow bill, and it's going to be hard to explain why, once again, Republicans will not even give us a hearing on this bill, because it pits ordinary Americans against Wall Street. We all know that 2.1 million phony accounts were created at Wells Fargo, another 560,000 phony credit cards. Now, the harm is not just the fees imposed on the card or on the account, because what happens is you're unaware of the account, you don't pay the fee, Wells Fargo reports that to the credit rating agency, and you don't get the mortgage. Now Wells Fargo comes forward and says, maybe we'll give you back the fee that we wrongfully imposed on the account that you didn't open. Wells Fargo goes further and says, if you legitimately opened an account and signed an arbitration clause with regard to that account, we will apply it to the accounts you didn't open, the arbitration provisions you didn't sign. Now, if you want to have some fun on my YouTube page, I've got CEO John Stumpf. I took about 6 questions for him to admit that that is Wells Fargo's position. Now, Stumpf resigned in disgrace, but the disgrace continues under new CEO Tim Sloan. That's why we're reintroducing this year the Justice for Victims of Fraud Act. We have 18 original co-sponsors in the House, including the ranking members of Judiciary and Financial Services. And in the Senate, Sherrod Brown, again, ranking on banking, has 18 Senate co-sponsors. Unfortunately, we do not have a Republican co-sponsor. And I think it will be difficult for the Republican Party to explain why they side with Wall Street over ordinary crime victims. And make no mistake about it, we're talking about 2.1 million crimes: bank fraud, forgery, identity theft. So with us today, we have a man who's a crime fighter, a man who does emergency dispatch for the Fort Worth Police. Talk about a crime victim. Phony account, phony credit card, $1,300 in phony fees. Sells to a third party the right to collect the $1,300 they made up. Wow. Then ruins the credit of the person that they victimized, leading to a denial of a mortgage and a chance to enjoy the American dream. Aaron Brody, come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Brody, and as he said, I'm an emergency dispatcher for the Fort Worth Police Department. When I was starting college in 2011 in Bakersfield, California, I went to my local branch of Wells Fargo there and opened up a checking account. Even though I had told the representative of the bank that I only wanted the checking account, he opened up a credit card with my name without my permission or any signature. Later, when I received the credit account in the mail and the card, the employee told me, I called him and told him that I didn't want it, that I'd never authorized it. He told me, go ahead and throw it away or don't use it and there'll be no repercussions. There'll also be no consequences. You can just get rid of it and nothing will happen. I followed his instructions and I destroyed the card and thought that had solved the matter. I was wrong. Every time I had used my debit card, a charge, if it went over the amount, I was charged fees to fund that card, to the Wells Fargo credit card. About a year after opening the account, I received an invoice from Wells Fargo saying that I owed them just under $1,000. I was shocked and horrified. I went back to the same Wells Fargo branch to dispute the charges, And Wells Fargo basically said they couldn't verify that I had not given consent or that I had given consent, as the employee who had worked there and who had established that account was no longer with the company. When I refused to pay these charges, Wells Fargo reported them to the credit reporting agencies. This greatly hurt my credit score, lowering it by nearly 125 points. This has impacted my life in many ways. I've had to make larger down payments. I've had to pay higher interest rates on car loans. I'm unable to qualify for a mortgage because of the fraud that Wells Fargo has done. Even I've had to go as far as hiring a credit repair company, which has cost me an additional $2,000 out of pocket. Wells Fargo has refused to make things right for me, and it turns out that I'm not the only one, because millions of fraudulent accounts were opened by Wells Fargo and their employees around the country. The only way that we'll be able to achieve justice is through the courts. I've recently joined a class action seeking to hold Wells Fargo accountable for their fraudulent activity. But Wells Fargo is trying to force me and thousands of other customers to opt out of the courts and go into secretive arbitration proceedings. There I'd be forced to go it alone instead of being in a public courtroom with thousands of other customers who were similarly impacted by Wells Fargo fraud. Fortunately, there's something that we can all do, and that can be done about Wells Fargo so they don't get away with it. I want to thank the senators and the members of Congress that are here today and introducing their bills and discussing their legislation that will help protect American consumers like myself and the others affected from forced arbitration, and fighting to protect the rights of ordinary Americans to hold powerful corporations like Wells Fargo accountable for all their wrongdoings. Thank you.